Good morning and welcome to our Coffee and Conversations this month. So this is a joint series that the Carsey School puts on with the Bureau of Education and Training from the state of New Hampshire and the Alumni Association of the Certified Public Managers from the state of New Hampshire as well. We are thrilled to bring this conversation to all of you on a monthly basis, and I'm really excited to have our guests with us today. This morning, our conversation is around the organization, the American Society for Public Administration, and the various chapters and organizations associated with that. So this is a professional organization for folks that are engaged in public and nonprofit service. Recently, we renamed what was previously the Massachusetts ASPA chapter to the Northern New England chapter. To better capture, who we serve as an organization. The four of us, myself, Aaron, Mark, and Ann serve on that board, and we were thrilled to be able to do that. So that is where this conversation is going for those of you that are logged in. And now let me just briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panel so they can introduce themselves. So my name is Dan Bromberg. I have been the Director of Academic Programs for the Carsey School of Public Policy for the past 6 years now. I'm currently serving as Interim Director of the Carsey School, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. Just a couple housekeeping features. There are closed captioning feature on this, which we will drop in the chat room for those of you that need it. Bailey will put that in there just so you know. There's a Q&A feature and a chat feature, and we're happy to take questions either at the end of this presentation or during the presentation, and I can help facilitate that conversation. So please feel free to use either one of those features, and we'll be thrilled to get to your questions. So let me turn to our panelists now. I'll start with Mark. If Mark, you could introduce yourself, and then I'll go to Ann, and then to you, Aaron.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm excited to join Aaron and Ann and Dan for this coffee in the morning webinar, I guess. So let me just say that I've been in the field of public administration one way or another for a long time, since the 60s. I'm what's known as an ASPA groupie, in a sense. That I joined ASPA 1966 when I was an MPA student at the behest of my professor at Farrell Heady at the University of Michigan, and I've always thought it was the best investment I ever made. So I've been able to participate in ASPA as really entree to, you could say, conversations, but context, networking, and the ability to help the organization, I hope, move forward. So I've been the national president. I've been president of chapters, founder of sections, et cetera. Dan knows, I've dragged him involved him in some of this, shall we say. And it's always been rewarding, because I think we need to, focus on the conversation between academics and practitioners, which is how ASPA was founded. So I've tried to do that in many different ways. And I look forward to talking about it more this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. Thank you. And just a bit of background. So Mark was the founding dean of the School of Public Affairs and Administration at Rutgers University in Newark. Prior to that, faculty member at John Jay College in New York City. So a long established scholarly career in public administration. And also a long established career as a dean, within the School of Public Affairs.
Thank you. And most recently at Suffolk.
And at Suffolk, that's right. Yeah. So Mark, we'll get back to that, the intersection of practitioners and academics, because I think that's what's most interesting for the audience that we currently have here. So let me turn over to Ann and introduction, and I guess you could also speak about your history with ASPA and how you got involved.
Sure. So similar to Mark, my professor, Carol Lewis from University of Connecticut, didn't make it optional. It was how we got access to some of the resource materials. And I have been a member since 1990 in various roles at the chapter level, particularly in Massachusetts. I had a few mentors who preceded me in sort of leadership as well as the chapter. Served as chapter president as well as other offices, national council, ran a conference in Las Vegas, one of our snazzier conference sites, and actually got to meet Mark for the first time at Rutgers when the national conference was hosted there many moons ago. And am a life member, which is an option when you decide to do that. It has been a great source of information for me. So I am currently the HR director for the town of Brookline, right outside of Boston. Have served as the staff director for the city council in Boston, as well as fiscal analyst and legislative director, among other things. I am a third generation public servant. And I proudly say that, especially during Public Service Recognition Week in May, which for the academics, they're getting ready for graduation, so or grading finals, one or the other. And I have taught, dabbled in the pracademic world, so to speak, as an adjunct at Suffolk, Northeastern, UMass Boston, and have done some guest lecturing in a couple other places. I find that this is my public administration home. While I deal with HR and I have a law degree and my law license from Massachusetts, they all intersect, and understanding the intersectionality between academic and practitioner, and that the practices that we decide to implement are, if we're doing it right, are research-based. And so we take from the academics the best that is there, and reading the ASPA journals, because they are so highly reviewed and regarded publicly, that the data is valid and that the sources are valid. So to be able to say if this is what's being previewed in the journals, then that's something you want to take on. And I have some of my best friends from all over the world as part of ASPA, and have gotten different opportunities as a result of those connections, whether it's to speak at a conference in Florida or to be invited to Taiwan to talk about HR in the US. So it really is an opportunity to meet people you wouldn't meet otherwise, and connect in ways that you don't realize it matters until 3 years later, when you have a topic that is something you have to go, ooh, Mark is an expert on that. Let me, reach out to him. So I really value that. And I hope that the next generation that is participating in this understands the value of affiliation and association with professional organizations.
Excellent. Thanks, Ann. And also, I should have mentioned at the top, it's also International Women's Day. So I'd love to throw that out there as well. And Ann, thank you so much for the service that you do as a public servant. We obviously appreciate that, and would love to learn more about that connection and how this has helped you in your career in Brookline and elsewhere. So would love to cover that. And let me turn over to Aaron and let him introduce himself and his connection to ASPA.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, everybody, for being here. Very happy to talk to you today. My name is Aaron Smith-Walter. I am currently the president of the Northern New England chapter of ASPA. I also am the interim director of the Masters of Public Administration program at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. And I've been involved in ASPA since about 2011. Similar to Ann and Mark, my professors impressed upon me at Virginia Tech the importance of joining the organization, and so I went to several of the conferences, sort of just to get a feel for the organization. And I'm just going to sort of underline what Mark and Ann have said here, is that the connection between practitioners and academics is vitally important. But for me as a student, when I first got involved, having students as an integral part of that dynamic was also something which was incredibly vital. And much to my disappointment at the time, we didn't have a local chapter. So I just had a membership with the national organization. And one of the great things here that I've experienced with the formerly Mass ASPA, currently Northern New England chapter, is having a local chapter and being able to go to events, talk to people in person, and have sort of a community that you can sort of consult with, access, and someone who's, you know, more on the beginning end of my professional life than wrapping it up. That's really vital whenever I encounter a problem that I need advice about, like how do I solve this? So that's been my experience with ASPA, and I can talk more about that, but I'll pass it back to Dan so we can move on to some other questions if we need to.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Aaron. I think that's really helpful, and I think, you know, the emphasis on the fact that there wasn't a local chapter is, you know, really important. So just to give our viewers kind of lay of the land, ASPA is a national organization. There are local chapters across the United States, and then there are sections that are topical sections. So, for example, Marc was, I believe, the founder, certainly the chair of the section on public performance measurement. You know, I served as chair of that section. There are sections on, you know, law in the courts. There are sections related to women in public service. So there are a whole bunch of different sections, and ideally here you could find, you know, where you connect to those sections. You know, this is certainly something that MPA programs often introduce their students to, and then bring them to these conferences, so then they can get acculturated and learn about the vast networks out there. In addition to these sections and these chapters, we also have regional conferences. So we have NACOPA, which is the Northeast Conference on Public Administration. There's also SICOPA, which is the Southeastern Conference on Public Administration. We now have a Midwestern Conference and a Western Conference that I believe has been growing as well. So the goal here is really to touch people, you know, across the United States. International partnerships. So we have a partnership with the European Group on Public Administration. So really this is to look across, you know, the globe and say, okay, who are the folks that are doing this work, you know, both in the public and nonprofit sectors who are serving the public? How do we make those connections? How do we make those, build those networks and get us to where we need to be? So I want to talk about that value add a little bit. You know, you could kind of think about this network, think maybe you go to a conference once a year. So Marc, maybe I'll turn to you first, and then, you know, Aaron and Ann, please jump in. What is the value add here for professionals who, you know, day to day, or you know what, Marc, I'm gonna put you on the back burner for a second. Let me turn to Ann, who is working in the field at this point. You know, as a public service practitioner, Ann, where do you see the value add? And then Marc and Aaron, please chime in.
So I think the value add is being able to learn about the leading research in the field, and how that happens is through the panel selection. And ASPA has been increasingly looking to partner practitioners and academics in panel presentations. So you sort of hear about the research, and then what I call, sort of particularly at the local level, is where the rubber meets the road, and how does that get implemented, or how can it be implemented and be successful? And that, you know, my experience in the personnel and labor relations section has been, you know, I sit with some of the leading thought leaders on personnel and labor relations that are published in PAR and the other, and ROPA and the other journals, and be able to have a conversation about, okay, this is the challenge I have. What is going on in the research field? And those happen after those sessions where you get to listen to the panels, and you exchange business cards or QR codes, or you share a LinkedIn, you know, address, whatever the means is these days. And really being able to say, okay, you know, I have a stack of business cards from different people, academics and practitioners, that on the back I have a topic and where I met them. And that's the old school version of like your Outlook contacts, right? But it's how I have them from back then. And I can go, I know I can talk to whomever and get the thought leader. And if they don't know, they're going to refer me to one of their colleagues. And then just practitioner to practitioner as well. The challenge, I think, in ASPA conferences is that practitioners don't get a promotion for presenting at a conference. And academics, that's part of their sort of course de rigueur. They have to do that and move forward. And that's how they sort of promote themselves. But really being able to go back to my supervisors and being able to say, this is the value add for me, whether being asked to speak or to go listen for, I think the ASPA conference is now 5 days. When it's back in person, but really being able to absorb that knowledge. And then, it takes me about a week to decompress after an ASPA conference to figure out what I learned and where things are. But it really is that interconnectivity. Particularly meeting international partners, I find has been really great to understand. We sort of think that we're the home of public administration in the US, and some of the practices that are being done across the world are unbelievably different. And we need to be doing that. So it's even international stealing of best practices. So
Yeah, that's great. Marc or Aaron, anything you want to add to this? Kind of the value that you've got in, thinking about professionals in practice. What does ASPA add to their lives, and how do they build this into their professional experiences?
I could add a little. I think having access to the research is important, and there's been a growing number of journals within ASPA or linked to ASPA. And I think there are other publications that are likely to come out that will distill the research and make it easier for the practitioners to actually use it to find the best practices. I think secondly, there are applications that you just serendipitously stumble over at the conference or in your conversations or whatever, because too many of us live in silos. And I think ASPA is an effort to break down those silos at heart. That's what it is. There are opportunities for practitioners to publish, and I'll disagree with that a little bit. I mean, I think that I think that practitioners are rewarded when they publish something. I think that it's it's maybe a little bit unique in their organization, but I think there's a lot of respect for publication. You can publish in the PA Times, for example, or you can publish, in some of the journals, either with a practitioner or, just, as a group of practitioners or an individual practitioner. I think that a big benefit is networking in terms of jobs. So if you go to a conference or you're involved in a local chapter or you're involved in a section, you will hear of positions that open up, and a lot of the opportunities there just arrive, at your doorstep because of conversations, it doesn't have to be a voice conversation, right? These days there's all kinds of ways of communicating, and LinkedIn and beyond, for example. So I think jobs are an important part, and I think that to underscore what Ann was saying in terms of understanding what's going on somewhere else, there's an opportunity really to travel. Had a lot of practitioners join us at conferences in Korea, which I think is probably the second largest public administration community in the world at this point, after the US. And in China, we're planning a conference now in India, which could be hybrid, but there'll be an opportunity to visit there. It'll be a performance conference at the end of June. And there have been lots of other opportunities for practitioners and academics to get involved in all of these meetings around the world. So basically, a lot of careers have been built successfully because ASPA offers lots of opportunities. And I think underneath it all, it's an opportunity to appreciate the breadth and the extent and depth of public service. Not just around the region, around the country, but around the world, and that the ethic of public service is out there strongly. So ASPA, if there are multiple opportunities there to really build one's career, to build one's organization, and to improve the delivery of services to the public as a result.
Thanks, Mark. Aaron, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I would add is just that the different perspectives of the individuals that are involved in ASPA really allows people to come to the conferences, interact in the sections, and have a better understanding of the enterprise as a whole, right? So when I worked in a local municipal department, it was public transportation, and we had particular problems that would crop up that we would have to address, and within that department, you had, that context really dictated how you thought about things, right? Like, these are the factors that I have to anticipate. Being able to talk about that with folks, in the section on transportation policy and administration, right? Being able to talk with actual academics at the time, they were able to understand the problem that I was having a little bit differently, because they approached it from being able to study multiple instances, multiple agencies, multiple instantiations of this problem. And so being able to engage in that dialectic, going back and forth between people who were practicing and people who were theorizing, I think really does a great job for professionals to understand not only how we're doing things in our organization, but why we're doing things. And that really sets us up for being more flexible when the situation in our agencies change, right? Because we have a better understanding of what might be some of those variables that exist within this greater sort of milieu of action. And when that change happens, we're like, oh yeah, I can totally understand what's going on, because, when I went to the conference, this was something that was mentioned, right? Which we didn't have to deal with at the time. So I really think that a better understanding of what it is we're doing, right, as practitioners and as scholars, right? Because I have the opposite experience now when I go to a conference and I talk to somebody, because I'll talk about, oh, well, here's the theory. And they're like, well, that doesn't comport to what I'm doing at all. And you're like, what? So that dialogue, right, and the advancing of our knowledge is really, really important, I think, just for even a concept of self-mastery and competence, like, oh yeah, this is something that we know has gone on. So I think that would be another value add that I've seen from both sides, practitioner and academic.
Yeah, great. And I'll just throw out there my experience. Part of the opportunity that you get as an academic to engage with practitioners, this is where our next research question comes from, right? I mean, these shouldn't just come from our journals alone and talking to other academics. By engaging with practitioners on a regular basis, which arguably the field of public administration does probably better than many fields out there. Our students are the folks who are out there doing the work. Having those conversations in classrooms, having those conversations at ASPA really does drive the research agenda. So we are aligning what we do with the needs of public servants in the field. I think it is important to note our flagship journal, Public Administration Review. The first thing you have to put, as your heading are 5 so what questions, right? So what? Why do your results matter to practitioners in the community? And if you can't answer those questions, then you need to go back to your research and figure out, what are the implications of this? So it really does take us outside of, that singular world of I'm an academic and I only talk to academics, to I am an academic at the nexus of public service, public policy, and implementation. And how do I engage with the people that are actually doing this work on a regular basis? And to me, that is, one of the foundational elements of ASPA and why it has been so valuable. So over the last year or so, we recognized as members of the board of Mass ASPA that there was, there were no chapters in Maine, Vermont, or New Hampshire. And we made a decision to shift what we were doing from what was, Mass ASPA or Massachusetts section of Massachusetts. I'm sorry, the section of ASPA in Massachusetts to the section for Northern New England. And that was a purposeful shift. And we kind of acknowledged that we had some members in these 3 states, but probably not as many members as we would like. So Aaron, I'm wondering as president, if you could talk about that shift a little bit, and also a resident of New Hampshire. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, and hopefully we could get some more engagement from these 3 Northern New England states.
Absolutely. I think that the exciting thing about the change is that this is something that no existing ASPA local has attempted to do. And really what we're trying to capitalize on is, I lived in Alaska before I moved here. So New England, though it may seem large to many, to me, it seems very, I still have to ask, like which Concord are we going to? Like which state is that in? And so what we have here is a heavy concentration of population over not a very large geographic area, at least comparatively. And so what we really want to do is begin to expand those networks of professionals that we've developed in Mass ASPA to sort of learn a little bit more from folks who work in the public sector and nonprofit in these neighboring states, and really bring that community together. And the idea behind it is that we're going to develop and launch a robust sort of IT infrastructure. We'll have a website where people will be able to log in, access recorded book talks, which we often do, trainings, panel discussions, those types of webinars, sort of similar to what's going on here. But we're also going to pair that with revolving local meetings so that people will be able to have a local network which is bridged to the more regional network, so that we'll be able to compare, across not only communities within the state, but also across states, and really begin to leverage those connections a little bit more effectively. And so the idea is to bring the opportunities and of course the questions and the challenges to a wider group of people to really begin to address. And so that's the idea behind it. And, it's one of those situations where it's very exciting for us because we're kind of getting to be pioneers here in the organization about building these types of relations. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to sort of come on board and really sort of put their stamp on this sort of new iteration of the Northern New England ASPA.
Yeah, Ann, go for it.
So this is in some ways a completion of an original task when there were no chapters north of Massachusetts. One of the things we had done at the chapter level was to say that our eligible membership was to include anybody who didn't have a host chapter, didn't have a state chapter. And that was the beginning of it. And we changed our constitution and our bylaws and did that because we knew that there were folks not being served, but we wanted them to have a home. So instead of being an at-large member where you sort of are maybe not cast adrift per se, but don't really have a place to call home, this was a place to do that. Obviously, in the early 2000s, we didn't have the technology that we do now to be able to do remote meetings and participate in a meeting that's hosted out of New Hampshire or Maine or whatever else, but we have that now. I really think that that's important. I think it is a value statement for ASPA to harness that. I think it will reinforce the Northeast Conference of Public Administration as well, because you've got that cohort, not excluding anything north of, the Massachusetts border, to be able to do that. And really being able to get those different perspectives, so.
If I could just just to cite a couple of benchmarks here. I think that there is a real thirst for getting together in terms of conferences and networks. So you go back to around 1980, we had a Region 1, when there were regions in ASPA, a Region 1 ASPA conference in New York, where we attracted well over 400 people. So there was a conference in Maine where we attracted so many people they ran out of hotel rooms. Since a conference in Boston, which filled up the Copley Hotel. Let's say so. I think people really do underneath it all want to get together in person, which I think is a lot of what Ann and Aaron have been talking about. That's it's fine to have electronic networks, but a lot of what happens, in terms of building knowledge and building opportunities, is what you stumble across serendipitously, in a sense. So I just wanted to underscore that, because I think that there's really a large unmet need, and what we're trying to do is say, okay, if you might be in Maine, you might be in the upper reaches of Maine, whatever, for example, but you're not isolated. And we want to bring you together first. Now, I can tell you that the person who I think is one of the most influential editors, in the field, for Routledge, and running a very large list, Laura, Stearns Varley, now lives in Maine, for example. So, but there are a lot of people we can tap various ways. So we don't want to give up on the in-person meetings there. It's just too easy to sort of parachute into to mix metaphors, to parachute into a online conference and just go to the panel and then leave, right? That's the way the national conference is sort of structured at this point. So I think we can build a different model here.
Yeah, that's great, Mark, and really helpful. A couple observations related to that. There are strong municipal manager associations in these three states, and I think that is to some degree what most of our local managers have relied on as their network.
Yeah.
Some observations, though, and we know this. I could speak to New Hampshire. We know that our certified public manager program, and we have Dennis Martino's online here, hasn't always captured our local managers. It does a great job of capturing our state employees. But those conversations, across our local, state, and county organizations aren't always happening through the types of organizations or networks that we have. I would say the Carsey School has offered an opportunity to bring these three levels of government together in various ways, and our nonprofit sector. But an organization like ASPA adds an umbrella to that, really to bring these three groups together and to engage in a different way. So I'll turn to Mark for this one, and then if Ann or Aaron, I know you both have been engaged. Can we talk about the Northeast Conference on Public Administration and what that looks like? Are there opportunities for folks to engage with that? Just maybe a little bit of history, Mark, and then we could chat about that and let people know about it at the very least.
Sure, Dan, thanks. Well, I think the regional conference had sort of faded away in the Northeast, and so when I was the dean at Rutgers, and Dan was there in the doctoral program, we took the initiative, I think in 2010, Dan, if I'm right, to
somewhere around there, yeah.
Somewhere around.
I think I might have been done by then.
Okay, well, to convene a meeting to reestablish the regional conference, following the very successful model of the Southeast Conference, the COPA. So there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. We created NCOPA, Northeast Conference, and then it's been operating since. With rotating conferences around the region, and we invented a virtual version of that during the pandemic, and hosted that through Suffolk and the Mass ASPA chapter, as it was called at the time. And I think that it's now time to figure out how to come up with some other hybrid model, let's say, for that conference. I think that the pandemic has left a lot of scars in a sense, in terms of organizational capacity to run these conferences and such. So I think, being realistic, there isn't a lot, aren't a lot of volunteers to go forward to hold an in-person conference. That wouldn't phase me in a sense, because I get involved in too many of these things, but it gets but it begins to look like a daunting effort, in a way. So I think we need to be creative about it. It might be possible to just establish things on a circulating basis and say, okay, it's hybrid, and come up with more opportunities on a hybrid basis for people to actually, have what we're doing this morning, a conversation, not just a panel, right? So it's active. It's not passive. You go, many of these conferences, particularly if you're a practitioner, okay, you go, you may be a little put off by the academics, in a sense, and you may just be sitting there. So we want everybody to be involved, active. We want to be, the idea is, how do you get people engaged? But in addition, how do you get people to experience firsthand what's going on in other areas? So, so there are some wild ideas out there. I mean, Craig Donovan, who's in New Jersey, who was on the National Council with me, he was suggesting a conference on a cruise ship at some point. I don't know.
That's hard to get a municipality or a state to say, yeah, I'm going.
Exactly, Ann, right. It's hard also to, once the ship departs, it's hard to be a latecomer or to come in just for a panel or something. Anyway.
Right. So just just so folks know where NCOPA has been at this point. I mean, so UMass Boston has hosted it, University of New Hampshire hosted it, University of Delaware hosted it, John Jay hosted it,
Pennsylvania host,
Penn State Harrisburg hosted it.
Yes.
So it really has. Say that again, Aaron.
So I think Vermont did too.
Yeah, UVM, we had a conference at UVM. So I'm not as cynical, I guess. I actually think, kind of at this point, people might be more comfortable. It's a hard thing to host, during the heightened days of the pandemic. But I'm hopeful that as we move out of that thinking, that we'll get back to these in-person conferences. But the goal here for all of our viewers is there are in-person opportunities to engage with other practitioners, with academics in your space, and we hope to be able to bring that to you on a regular basis. Whether that is virtual or whether that is in person, that engagement is essential to this. So we're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour, so I want to just keep that in mind. And I want to open it up to any questions that anyone who is viewing might have. But I'm just kind of curious next steps. I mean, Ann, if you have any advice for practitioners, or Aaron, any way to get involved in the Northern New England chapter, how do we get engaged, with ASPA? How do we get engaged with the Northern New England chapter? Do I sign up? I mean, what does that look like? So, Ann, I wonder if you could share with us from the practitioner's perspective, kind of next steps. What does someone do?
And I've said this before, how you get engaged is by saying yes. And that is whether it's a virtual event or it's an in-person impromptu meeting or whatever else, is saying yes to something, stretching, and being able to explore a new opportunity, whether that's to speak on a panel and you're not a good public speaker, but this is a way for you to stretch your skills, or doing that. That's how I started. I said yes to too many things eventually, but that was okay. Because you do get involved and excited and really want to make both the organization better, and depending on where you are in your career, and make the next generation better. For those who are practitioners out in the audience or are academics, one of the things I did in my when I would go to different conferences, I would make an appointment to meet with the person who did my job in that community. So when I went to Denver and Dallas and New Orleans and DC, I met with someone at the city council when I was working at the city council, and now I meet with HR directors. So I create that in-person connection, and also learn about how they do things and steal ideas liberally, because it's not a copyright violation to steal from one government entity to the other. You give them high praise and say, this wasn't a new idea, but moving on from there. And really, it really is saying yes to being able to stretch. And there is a home, I would say, for anyone, whether academic, practitioner, academic, nonprofit, within the sections and the chapters of ASPA. And like-minded people, and people have different views from you, live together in this, what I will call a safe space these days, where they can have respectful conversation and really explore the issues and topics, and really in a respectful way that doesn't really get into what we see on the news.
Awesome. Thanks, Marc or Aaron.
Sure. I think that sort of getting involved with the organization is one of those things that, like Ann said, yeah, just jump on in. We have a Facebook page that people can visit to get connected. I can put that link into the chat if that's helpful. I have a Twitter account that you can follow, so long as Twitter's working, right? We've had a couple of hiccups here in the past couple of days. We have a LinkedIn page. As I said, we'll be launching a fully independent standing website here in the next couple of months. And then the other thing too is that you can just attend some of our events. So, I'd like to invite everybody here to a upcoming book talk that we have on March 23rd. These are sort of events that we do every month. And the book talk we have is a really interesting one, looking at the NRA and the stories that it tells by a Canadian public administration, public policy scholar who came down and actually did participant observation, right, and went to lots of NRA events. And so those are the kind of things that you can do just to dip your toe in the water, right? You will have to interact with me, but that's not always a bad thing. And so these are kind of ways that you can get involved. And of course, you can also contact me directly if that's something, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Northern New England chapter. I would be more than happy to talk with you and answer any questions. And I'll put my email in the chat as well, if that's the way that I can get that out to you.
And let me just add that ASPA on all levels is a voluntary organization. But that means there are lots of opportunities to volunteer, or, for established, entities with it, like the chapters or sections, or to create something new. So if you as a practitioner or academic or whatever, an academic have ideas as to what needs to be done to fill some sort of gap out there, or to present some innovative, approach, or to share best practices, whatever, the door is open. It's not hard to get involved that way and to connect with people and to share knowledge. So it doesn't, the knowledge bubbles up from lots of different directions. But we're the door, but we're always welcoming people who really want to get involved and take something on, pursue it, and find allies along the way.
That's great. I'll say, there is an annual conference coming up. It is a virtual conference, so pretty easy, low barrier of entry for anyone that does want to join. You don't need to be a member of ASPA to join, but I would encourage you to do that, as it certainly has other benefits associated with being a member than just going to the annual conference. But you could go onto the ASPA website and check that out. Marc, I wanted to give you just 2 minutes. I didn't prompt you for this, but maybe you could talk about the virtual museum for a couple seconds, and then we could close out. Is that, you want to share information about that?
Yeah, happy to do that. Okay, so a project that we've been incubating for a while, and we want, trying to establish, is a virtual museum of public service. This really comes out of the underlying ethos of ASPA, and and what goes on in various sections, and in various various locales within ASPA. So the idea of the virtual museum is to really underscore the commitment to public service, and to sort of counter the the stereotypes of, quote, bureaucracy with the facts. So the virtual museum will really illustrate cases where individuals have extended themselves, not in heroic ways, but in everyday ways, in terms of making a difference for the population at large, really improving the quality of life of people, which is the underlying function of government. So we have a prototype for the virtual museum, a set of 7 galleries, and ultimately maybe 36 rooms within those, across those galleries, that would illustrate what's going on, for example, in public health. Well, Dr. Fauci is, the epitome of public service, let's say, in public health. There are also many other people who, back it up. I think public health is really our first line of defense. Maybe even before you get to the military option, in a sense. So, but there are many other people quietly doing public service: social workers, let's say, nurses, people who are making sure that regulations are enforced, let's say public health regulations, people supporting education or transportation. There's a broad range of dozens of government functions. So what we're trying to do is bring this to life, but do it in a way that can reach many people. So instead of proposing to build a museum of public service on the Mall in Washington, which would probably take 100 years if you could ever do it at all, right? The museum could be developed in terms of a platform. So we're about to, we're in the midst of learning about how to do fundraising and launch a campaign along those lines, which we will then approach all ASPA members and many public service entities out there, which have been sort of fighting this battle for a long time, but haven't had a focal point in which to do it. So we welcome anybody who's interested. Just shoot me an email, or should Dan's involved. What?
Just say yes.
Just say yes, exactly.
Right.
Right. So
yeah.
We hope we'll be able to launch that within a year.
So thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Marc. And anyone who's interested, in either ASPA or the Northern New England chapter or the Virtual Museum of Public Service, you're welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you to any of these folks. So let me close by just saying thank you to Marc, Ann, and Aaron for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time. We know all of you are busy and involved in a lot of different things. Thank you to all of our viewers for signing on. We're thrilled to be able to bring this to you, the second Wednesday of every month. And just as a reminder, the Coffee and Conversations is a discussion jointly organized by the Carsey School of Public Policy at the University of New Hampshire, the State of New Hampshire Bureau of Education and Training, and the New Hampshire Association of Certified Public Managers. We're thrilled to have this partnership. We love this partnership. We love to be able to bring all of you together on a monthly basis. And our topics range, as you all know. So we look forward to seeing everyone next month. And once again, thank you to our participants and thank you to our viewers. And take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.